Tertium Organum by P.D. Ouspensky, Chapter 2, Part 2. Taking all these things into consideration, we should try to define clearly our understanding of those sides of our receptivity dealt with by Kant. What is space? Taken as an object that is perceived by our consciousness, space is for us the form of the universe, or the form of the matter in the universe. Space possesses an infinite extension in all directions, but it can be measured only in three directions, independent of one another, in length, breadth, and height. These directions we call the dimensions of space, and we say that our space has three dimensions. It is three-dimensional. By independent direction, we mean, in this case, a line at right angles to another line. Our geometry knows only three such lines, which are mutually at right angles to one another and not parallel among themselves. But why three only, and not 10 or 15? This we do not know. And here is another very significant fact. Either because of some mysterious property of the universe, or because of some mental limitation, we cannot even imagine to ourselves more than three independent directions. But we speak of the universe as infinite, because the first condition of infinity is infinity in all directions and in all possible relations. So we must presuppose in space an infinite number of dimensions. That is, we must presuppose an infinite number of lines perpendicular and not parallel to each other, and yet out of these lines we know, for some reason, only three. It is usually in some such guise that the question of higher dimensionality higher dimensionality appears to normal human consciousness. Since we cannot construct more than three mutually independent perpendiculars, and if the three-dimensionality of our space is conditional upon this, we are forced to admit the indubitable fact of the limitedness of our space in relation to geometrical possibilities. Though, of course, if the properties of space are created by some limitation of consciousness, then the limitness lies in ourselves. No matter what this limitedness depends on, it is a fact that it exists. A given point can be the vertex of only 8 independent tetrahedrons. Through a given point, it is possible to draw only 3 perpendicular and not parallel straight lines. Upon this, as a basis, we define dimensionality of space by the number of lines it's possible to draw in it, which are mutually at right angles to one another. The line upon which there cannot be a perpendicular, that is, another line, constitutes linear or one-dimensional space. Upon the surface, two perpendiculars are possible. This is superficial or two-dimensional space. In space being in quotes, 3 perpendiculars are possible. This is solid or three-dimensional space. The idea of the fourth dimension arose from the assumption that, in addition to the 3 dimensions known to our geometry, there exists still a fourth, for some reason unknown and inaccessible to us, i.e., that in addition to the 3 known to us, a mysterious fourth perpendicular is possible. This assumption is practically founded on the consideration that there are things and phenomena in the world undoubtedly really existing, but quite incommensurable in terms of length, breadth, and thickness, and lying, as it were, outside of the three-dimensional space. By really existing, we understand that which produces definite action, which possesses certain functions, which appears to be the cause of something else. That which does not exist cannot produce any action, has no function, and cannot be a cause. But there are different modes of existence. There is physical existence, recognized by certain sorts of actions and functions, and there is metaphysical existence, recognized by its actions and its functions. A house exists, and the idea of good and evil exists, but they do not exist in like manner. One and the same method of proof of existence does not suffice for the proof of the existence of a house and for the proof of the existence of an idea. The house is a physical fact. An idea is a metaphysical fact. Physical and metaphysical facts exist, but they exist differently. In order to prove the idea of a division into good and evil, i.e., a metaphysical fact, I have only to prove its possibility. This is already sufficiently established, but if I should prove that a house, i.e., a physical fact, may exist, it does not at all mean that it really does exist. If I prove that a man may own the house, it is no proof that he owns it. Our relation to an idea and to a house are quite different. It is possible by a certain effort to destroy a house, to burn, to wreck it. The house will cease to exist. But suppose you attempt to destroy by an effort an idea. The more you try to contest, argue, refute, ridicule, the more the idea is likely to spread, grow, strengthen. And contrariwise, silence, oblivion, non-action, non-resistance will exterminate, or in any case will weaken the idea. Silence, oblivion, will not wreck a house. It will not hurt a stone. It is clear that the existence of a house and that of an idea are quite different existences. Of such different existences, we know very many. A book exists, and also the contents of a book. Notes exist, and so does the music that the notes combine to make. A coin exists, and so does the purchasing value of a coin. A word exists, and the energy which it contains. We discern, on the one hand, a whole series of physical facts, and, on the other hand, a series of metaphysical facts. As facts of the first kind exist, so also do facts of the second kind exist, but differently. From the usual positivist point of view, it will seem naive in the highest degree to speak of the purchasing value of a coin separately from the coin, of the energy of a word separately from the word, of the contents of a book separately from the book, and so on. We all know that these are only, quote, what people say, end quote. That, in reality, purchasing value, energy of a word, and contents of a book do not exist, that by these conceptions we only denote a series of phenomena in some way linked with coin, word, book, but in substance quite different from them. But is it so? We decided to accept nothing as given. Consequently, we shall not negate anything as given. We see in things, in addition to what is external, something internal. We know that this internal element in things constitutes a continuous part of things, usually their principal substance. And quite naturally, we ask ourselves, where is this internal element and what does it represent? And by itself. And what does it represent in and by itself? We see that it is not embraced within our space. We begin to conceive of the idea of a higher space, possessing more dimensions than ours. Our space then appears to be somehow a part of a higher space, i.e., we begin to believe that we know, feel, measure only part of space, that part which is measurable in terms of length, width, and height. As was said before, we usually regard space as a form of the universe, or as a form of the matter of the universe. To make this clear, it's possible to say that a cube is the form of matter in a cube. A sphere is the form of matter in a sphere. Space, an infinite sphere, is the form of the entire matter of the universe. H.P. Blavatsky in The Secret Doctrine has this to say about space, quote, "The superficial absurdity of assuming that space itself is measurable in any direction is of little consequence. The familiar phrase, the fourth dimension of space, can only be an abbreviation of the fuller form, the fourth dimension of matter in space. The progress of evolution may be destined to introduce us to new characteristics of matter. But the formula defining space as the form of matter in the universe suffers from this deficiency, that there is introduced in it the concept of matter, i.e., the unknown. I have already spoken of that dead-end siding, quote, dead-end siding, end quote. X equals y, y equals x, to which all attempts at the physical definition of matter inevitably lead. Psychological definitions lead to the same thing. In a well-known book, The Psychology of the Soul, A.I. Herzen, Herzen, says, "We call matter everything which is directly or indirectly offering resistance to motion, directly or indirectly produced by us, manifesting a remarkable analogy with our passive states. And we call force, in brackets motion, that which directly or indirectly communicates movement to us or to other bodies, thus manifesting the greatest similitude to our active states. Consequently, matter and motion are something like projections of our active and passive states. It is clear that it is possible to define passive state only in terms of the active and active only in terms of the passive. Again, two unknowns defining one another." E. Douglas Fawcett, Fawcett, in an article entitled "Idealism and the Problem of Nature in the Quest," April 1910, discusses matter from this point of view. Matter, like force, does not give us any trouble. We know all about it for the very good reason that we invented it. By matter, we think of sensuous objects. It is mental change of concrete. It is mental change of concrete, but two complicated facts, which are difficult to deal with. Let me read that sentence again. It is mental change of concrete, but two complicated two complicated facts, which are difficult to deal with. It is mental change of concrete, but two complicated facts, which are difficult to deal with. Well, either that's a convoluted sentence or I'm just really dull today because I have no idea what he's trying to say there. Strictly speaking, matter exists only as a concept. Truth to tell, the character of matter, even when treated only as a conception, is so unobvious that the majority of people are unable to tell us exactly what they mean by it. An important fact is here brought to light. Matter and force are just logical concepts, i.e., only words accepted for the designation of a lengthy series of complicated facts. It's difficult for us, educated almost exclusively along physical lines, to understand this clearly, but in substance, it may be stated as follows. Who has seen matter and force, and when? We see things, we see phenomena. Matter, independently of the substance from which a given thing is made, or of which it consists, we have never seen, and never shall see. but the given substance is not quite matter. This is wood or iron or stone. Similarly, we shall never see force separately from motion. What does this mean? It means that matter and force are just such abstract conceptions as value or labor as the purchasing power of a coin or the contents of a book. It means that matter is such stuff as dreams are made of. In quotes, such stuff as dreams are made of. I believe that's a Shakespearean quote. And because we can never touch this stuff, in quotes, we can only see it in dreams. So we can never touch physical matter, nor hear, nor see, nor photograph it separately from the object. We cognize things and phenomena which are bad and good, but we never cognize matter and force separately from things and phenomena. Matter is as much an abstract conception as are truth, good, and evil. It is impossible to put matter or any part of matter into a chemical retort or crucible, as it is impossible to sell, in quotes, Egyptian darkness in vials. However, it is said that Egyptian darkness is sold as a black powder in Athos, Athos, or elsewhere. Therefore, perhaps somewhere by someone, even matter has been seen. In order to discuss questions of this order, a certain preparation is necessary, or a high degree of intuition, but unfortunately it is customary to consider fundamental questions of cosmogony very lightly. A man easily admits his incompetency in music, dancing, or higher mathematics, but he always maintains the privilege of having an opinion and being a judge of questions relating to first principles. It is difficult to discuss with such men. For how will you answer a man who looks at you in perplexity, knocks on the table with his fingers and says, "This is matter. I know it. Feel." How can it be an abstract conception? To answer this is as difficult as to answer the man who says, "I see that the sun rises and sets." Returning to the consideration of space, we shall under no circumstances introduce unknown quantities in the definition of it. We shall define it only in terms of those two data which we have decided to accept at the very beginning. The world and consciousness are the facts which we decided to recognize as existing. By the world, we mean the combination of all the causes of our sensations in general. By the material world, we mean the combination of causes of a definite series of sensations, those of sight, hearing, touch, smell, taste, sensations of weight, and so on. Space is either a property of the world or a property of our knowledge of the world. Three-dimensional space is either a property of the material world or a property of our receptivity of the material world. Our inquiry is confined to the problem: how shall we approach the study of space? And that concludes Chapter 2.